Hello, everybody, and welcome to our Luminate Music in 2022 analysis of the top trends with data and insights. This is a conversation about our Luminate year-end report that was released this morning at 10 a.m. Eastern. If you haven't had a chance to download that already, you can do that from our website. I'm Jamie Markinet, Senior Director of Music Insights and Industry Relations at Luminate.
And I'm Matt Yaji, our VP of Research, coming to you live from our studio in Los Angeles. I've always wanted to play Kathy and Hoda, so thank you for giving me this opportunity. I am normally based in Brooklyn.
And I am based in Nashville, Tennessee. For those of you who haven't joined one of our presentations before, haven't read one of our reports, we do want to take a second to introduce ourselves to you. We are Luminate. We are historically known as the music and data company that powers the Billboard charts. But when you think about that, we have a lot of data that's coming in, and we are able to go through this data, sift through it, pull out the best nuggets of information and insights for the music industry at large as well, to provide insights that you can activate on. We did rebrand in March of 2021. I was saying 2022. That's right. It's
time as a construct.
It's crazy. Thinking 2022 right now. So we did rebrand in March of 2022. So this is our first year-end report coming to you as Luminate, and also this is our first time coming to you from our new LA office, which we moved into this fall, and we are extremely excited about. Core pillars: consumption, consumer insights, and global expansion.
Yeah, and like Jamie was saying, we have a ton of data. So this year alone, we tracked over 5 trillion streams globally, representing consumption from 200 different countries around the globe. We also, on the consumer insights side, which is the team that I lead here at Luminate, we conducted surveys in over 30 different countries. We can do them in pretty much any country. So if you want to learn more about Botswana maybe, or Sri Lanka, or Peru, we can certainly be there too. So today, what we want to cover with you are some of the key insights from our year-end report. So Jamie's going to start off with a look at some of the top-line metrics from 2022, and then we're going to dive into 6 key topics that we think were really, really relevant from last year. These topics include things like the consumption renaissance, Fanalytics, Gen Z, because it would not be a webinar if we didn't talk about Gen Z, music sync, catalog sales, and then we'll wrap up with a brand new score we introduced this morning in our year-end report called the Global Hit Score. I'm not going to steal too much thunder from that. We'll get to that at the end. So I'm going to hand it off to Jamie to talk about the consumption trends.
Thanks, Matt. So as we start to jump in here, I want to just call out a couple of things. There's a lot of data, especially, throughout the entire presentation, but especially on the next few slides. We're not going to go line through line or in every single data point, but we're going to call out what we think are the most relevant and most impactful to everybody. Also, on these next couple of slides, this is the period of 2022 versus 2021. And with that, as Matt mentioned earlier, 5.3 trillion streams globally. That's audio and video combined, and that's the first time that we reached above the 5 trillion metric mark in audio and video. That's a 25.6% increase over the year previous. When we start to look at the US, 1 trillion audio streams were achieved in November. That was the first time on-demand audio streams had hit that level. That is a tremendous mark, and overall there was a 12%. About a 12% increase in on-demand audio streams over the year previous. Also wanted to call out in that line that, we also had seen a little bit of a slowing in streaming growth. Now, to be clear, streaming itself, overall volume was continuing to increase. When I'm saying it's a slowing, I'm saying that the new growth each year was tapering a little bit. That had been a trend since 2018, where the new volume of growth wasn't quite the same as the year before. Actually, though, we did see that reversed this year. So 120 billion more on-demand audio streams in 2022 than 2021. And the change from 2021 saw was 113 billion. So we did see that reverse for the first time since 2018. Really, really happy to see that. A couple other things we wanted to call out here. Vinyl sales, 43.5 million in 2022. That is a 4% increase. And when we're looking at the week over week, the biggest drivers for vinyl sales this year, obviously the holiday period, historically, that's 25 to 30% of the overall yearly sales. The record store days drove a lot of vinyl. And then the Taylor Swift album release in October is also a key vinyl driver.
And certainly there's got to be some capacity constraints that might be limiting that growth. So it's
definitely, Matt. Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. There were very, very big jumps from 2019 to 2020 in terms of vinyl. That has slowed, but I did read a Billboard article earlier in the fall. I'm based in Nashville, and that Tennessee is going to save the vinyl industry with the capacity of the new production plants coming online. So we do, talking with people in the industry, that is definitely been an issue where, you just can't, you can only produce so much vinyl. So with those new plants coming on, hopefully
something to watch this year. Yeah,
definitely. Also something to watch, we did include cassettes in this. A lot of artists are starting to add these to their web stores. And so we wanted to give a little bit more visibility into this format. Now, 440,000 total units for the year, but that is a 28% jump over 2021. And we also saw a big jump from 2020 to 2021 in cassette sales as well. So the format is growing, but right now, small numbers, but something to keep an eye on. Looking at catalog versus current. Now, obviously, this has been a huge conversation. Catalog is still continuing to drive a lot of activity. In our mid-year report, if you look at the current share number for 2022, in our mid-year report, that number was for current was 27.6%. So current did eat back a little bit of the share there, 0.2%, but it did. One thing I also wanted to call out is in the mid-year, current total album consumption, when you looked at the half of 2022 versus the half year of 2021, current total album consumption was actually down. So through the fall, a lot of big releases.
Say how much of Taylor contributed to that.
Definitely. A lot of big, and that was, obviously, drove a lot of activity. So we did see that number go up, which is great to see. Also, to frame that, just always want to, call out that when we do talk about catalog streaming, it is the more recent songs that are driving it. It's the 2017 to 2020. It's that period that's really
catalog.
Yeah, that's driving the most, and it's important to call that out. As we start to turn towards our first trend that we're going to talk about today, the consumption renaissance, we noticed that artists are engaging with their audiences in very different ways. And when you look at a couple of the, the big headline drivers this year, obviously Bad Bunny, Beyonce, Taylor Swift, these were, artists that stayed near the top of the charts. And when we started to look at their consumption mix and their fans and how their fans are consuming, three very different stories, which we thought were very, very interesting. Now, Bad Bunny achieved a #1 album, wholly digital, just streaming. 95.8% of it was streaming. Beyonce, #1 album. These are all #1 albums on the Billboard 200. Beyonce's was about 38% digital, and her album number there was 42.6%. I'm sorry, for the streaming equivalents. But what we saw then too with Taylor Swift is a little bit more of an even distribution. And so each one of these artists, definitely knew their audiences, knew how to the formats that their audience would enjoy and consume, and was able to provide it for them.
And for Beyonce too, we're talking about the vinyl shortage.
Yep.
Her big push was the CD, right?
Oh yeah.
So I think one of the other things that kind of follows along with the cassette tape trend is that finding other ways to engage your audience and giving them another touch point to listen to your music or not listen, right? Like we're going to see some stats here in a second about do people actually listen to this physical music they're buying?
Yeah, exactly. Thanks, Matt. Yeah, Beyonce, 120,000 CDs in her first week mix too. So how genre fans are consuming music? We are finding that Latin fans are 30% more likely to watch short music video clips on social sites. Obviously, Latin music has historically done very well with video. And so we're seeing that there, and it speaks to Bad Bunny's success digitally. We are seeing that hip hop fans are 23% more likely to stream audio songs online. And that, when we're looking at Taylor's more evenly distributed consumption mix, we are also seeing that pop fans look most like the US average consumer as well for most forms of consumption. Taking a look at the genres that grew this year, children's, Latin, world, dance, electronic, and classical were the genres that grew faster than the industry when we're looking at total audio and video streams combined. We like to take that total number, especially when you have a genre like Latin that has historically done very well with video. So we take a look at that. Did want to call out when you're looking at this chart, a couple of things. Pop, even with Taylor's album, as we discussed earlier today, it did not keep pace with the overall industry growth number of 12.2% in the United States in terms of on-demand audio and video streams combined. A couple other interesting facts. You look at the children's category, a lot of that is Encanto, one of the biggest albums of the year. And also,
we do talk about Bruno in this webinar.
And we do, we certainly do. And I think that a lot of families also probably were talking about Bruno because one in nearly every 7 audio or video streams this year in the children's genre was a song from Encanto. That is a lot of parents that know every single word.
Yeah.
Also, with engaging with consumers and where, the times that we're in, we did see that through our consumer research data that fans are listening to music to be happy, to be calm, or to have fun. Those are the reasons that they are listening to music. And we're also seeing, and this is echoed throughout not just music, but we're sports and other arenas in today's society, that mental health is really the #1 cause that we are seeing that fans care about. And either rock fans or pop fans, hip hop and Latin fans, they've all called out mental health as one of the top or the top cause that they care about.
And I think you're seeing a lot more artists get involved in this space too. So Meg Thee Stallion's the perfect example with her Bad Bitches Have Bad Days Too. Exactly. Charity, which is mental health. And some people have called me a bad bitch before, and I do have bad days, so I can testify to that. But I think it's really important that music isn't just serving an entertainment need, it's also serving a very deep emotional need for a lot of people.
Yeah, and that's how you can connect with fans as well and really share that bond and deepen that relationship.
Awesome. So speaking of fans, one of the things we premiered in our year-end report was our Fanalytics segmentation. And I've got some of the people who worked on that segmentation here in the room. And for those who are less familiar with segmentations, we took a look at the entire US music listener landscape. And we wanted to understand what made people different in the way that they consume music. And we found there are 5 archetypes. And we even gave them fun names. And I promise you that even though some of these may overlap with the names of segments in very popular streaming services, we thought of these first. So we have the enthusiast, the devotee, the radio rocker, the cool kid, and the ghost listener. We actually have this live on our website. So if you want to take the survey and find out which listener you are, you can do that in just, I think, 5 or 6 questions. Grant's giving me a nod. But we want to focus on 2 that relate to a lot of the trends that we're going to be discussing today and some that we've already discussed. So contrary to what this might look like, this was not based on me. The devotee is a segment that represents about 8% of the US music listening population. This group is what I would describe as what marketers would traditionally consider the super fan. Like we've kind of stepped away from the idea of there being just one super fan because everybody's a super fan in their own way. Everyone likes things that they like. There's just different ways of monetizing them. So it was really important for us that this segmentation be focused on how different parties in the music industry can engage these audiences to achieve their business goals. So this group, more likely to be male, more likely to be Gen X. We don't talk a lot about Gen X, not talk about Bruno. We don't talk about Gen X a lot in research. Everyone's really focused on Gen Z, but this generation has a lot of money and they're spending it on pretty much everything. On live music, on premium streaming, on vinyl. And what you can see, if we actually go to the next page, these are actually the people who are listening to the vinyl, right? So I alluded to this earlier. Only half of people who buy vinyl actually own a record player, right? So again, talking about ways to engage with fans, it may not necessarily be about giving them a physical medium to listen to, but another way to express their fanship. We were doing this webinar from my home office. You would see the whole wall behind me a very nice cover art that is in a frame. I do have a record player, but I do also frame. And what's also interesting, and I think this speaks to the Taylor Swift trend as well, is that what's driving a lot of the vinyl purchasing is actually younger consumers. Gen Z is 22% more likely to buy vinyl. And this vinyl consumer isn't just buying vinyl, they're doing everything. They're spending twice as much on music overall, including concert tickets, streaming, merch, than the average consumer.
And we are seeing, you know, obviously Taylor's vinyl did very, very well. Harry Styles, Harry's House, Olivia Rodrigo. Like, we are seeing younger artists have success in the format.
Every record that's getting broken is a younger skewing artist. And as much as I love Fleetwood Mac and I could listen to Rumors on repeat, that's not what's driving this trend.
Yeah.
The other segment, and this is the one I actually belong to, I took the test. I'm a certified cool kid. I have the receipts.
It's verified.
This is the other segment that we wanted to focus on here. This is a more free streaming audience. So this audience is more female, more likely to be Gen Z and millennial, high concentration in the South. It's of the segments, the one that's most likely to be African-American or Black. And this audience listens to a lot of hip hop, rap, and R&B. And so again, talking about the ways that you reach out to different audiences, this audience is very ripe for monetization as well. It's just through a different means, right? This audience is super active on social media, especially apps like Snapchat. So focusing on reaching that audience through social and driving them to streaming platforms where they can really generate those streams for an artist and for the platforms themselves. We also took the liberty of developing little playlists for each of these segments, which you can also find on our website if you're looking for some new music to listen to. The devotees, this group listens to almost every single genre more than the average population. So they're engaged with lots of, especially emerging genres like Latin is emerged, but very high growth, Afro beats, world music. And so you're gonna see songs like Despecha from Rosalia. You're gonna see Fireboy DML, Bjork, a personal favorite. The cool kids, like you saw in the demographic profile, listen to a lot more hip hop R&B. They're also, though, very plugged into chart toppers, both from this decade and prior. You'll see Nirvana breaks this list. Also artists like Summer Walker, Future, Doja Cat, and others. Yeah. So we've come to the Gen Z portion, as promised. So if we look at Gen Z, they follow a trend that the music industry has always known about. Younger people spend a lot of time with music. But we're also seeing those are also spending a lot of money on music. They're spending almost 20% more time every week with music than the average music listener, and they're spending 10% more money. This may not be their money. They may be getting this from their parents. But I think you also forget that Gen Z,
I was just about to ask.
Yeah, everyone, so like this really annoys me as a researcher, is that people think millennials are still 18 to 34. Some millennials are 40. We don't want you to know that though. We're still very young. So Gen Z are starting their careers. Some of the oldest Gen Zs are 24, 25 years old. So they are coming into disposable income in ways that previously weren't available to this generation. What's even more interesting to me is not just are they spending more, they want to spend even more than they're already spending right now, right? They wish that artists had more merch options so that way they could support their artists they love even more.
That's great. I love that. And also, you know, kind of speaks to, you know, merch items, going to an artist web store, being able to purchase the vinyl there, those sorts of things, having it right next to it, the great places to be able to monetize.
Yeah, and even from our research, we look at the places people are buying merch, and it's so diversified, right? And we've got some friends from the DSPs here in the room who could tell you firsthand what some of the merch monetization options look like on DSP platforms, right? So there's many different places you can engage with fans on this merch that they're so hungry for. In terms of how Gen Z is discovering music, should not come as a huge surprise that it is largely digital. So things like short video clip sites, a la TikTok, traditional music streaming through either audio or video, as well as just broader social media. And when we look at the types of sites they are using, it is heavily focused on visual media. I think people don't talk about Snapchat enough when they talk about Gen Z. It is still around, and they're over twice as likely to be using Snapchat, but also TikTok and Instagram.
Of course, of
course. This visual trend also extends to other forms of entertainment. So Gen Z is much more likely to engage with video games, with short form video in general, not just music related short form. And it also is reflected in the mediums that they aren't engaging in as much. So audio only, things like radio. We also conducted a study last year about Web3 and gaming, and Gen Z is all over it. I think a lot of this we'll get to in the next slide has to do with gaming, because it's been one of the spheres where Web3 technologies have already been deployed for years.
Yeah, they've kind of grown up with it, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
But Gen Z is way more aware of and interested in things like the metaverse, NFTs, and they're much more likely to be gaming. So on the next slide, what we'll see here, nearly 90% of Gen Z use a gaming console.
Yeah.
Wild. Like, this is not, it's not just people in their parents' basements, right? This is, gaming is everybody. Like, it is just part of culture for Gen Z. And they're more likely to be using other technologies that are being introduced as gaming first. So things like VR headsets. Sony is releasing the PlayStation 5 VR this quarter. And Gen Z is also more likely to be using sandbox games. So things like Roblox, where you're creating your own world, which is a metaverse, right? So I think as these technologies grow, they're going to build on each other, and Gen Z is going to be there to.
And as Gen Z, as we saw in an earlier slide, has more disposable income too, correct?
Yeah, because those headsets aren't cheap.
Well, thanks, Matt. And you know, as we kind of turn to one of the next topics, from sync on screen to growth in streams, you know, this has been such a fascinating area of music discovery. You know, fans can discover music everywhere, it seems, these days. You know, one of the stories that, you know, really caught my attention this year out of the sports world was the Mets pitcher Edwin Diaz, and his walk-on music, and how that started to, you know, took a song from 2017, Narco, to I think 2 million streams a week, you know, after,
not too shabby.
Yeah, you know, and so people are discovering everywhere. But one of the big stories this year obviously was sync. And, you know, Kate Bush and Running Up the Hill obviously really like blew the roof off of it, and really shine a light here. You know, we all have heard that story, or for those of you who might not have, you know, when it was featured in Stranger Things, the Netflix show, the streaming grew 21,000% in just a couple of weeks. And you know, if you look at the on-demand audio streams for that song by Kate Bush, it is number 14 for the year, and that is from late May until now. So, you know, you think about what a year would have been for that song too. But, you know, what we wanted to dive into today are some of maybe of the lesser known stories of sync and how those were successful. Also, you know, why is sync working in this way? Why is it really catapulting music discovery? And what we found is through our consumer research that hip hop, country, and rap fans are all saying that either movies or TV are some of the biggest ways that they are discovering music these days. Those are places that they are discovering music. And when we take a look at our first look today with Elton John, this was his live stream that happened with Disney Plus, and this was his farewell concert from Dodger Stadium here in LA. And, you know, looking at this, you can really see that, you know, in this chart, we have the Diamonds album, and we also have his primary artist catalog. So you can see that when the Hold Me Closer track with Britney Spears came out, Diamonds album really shot up. But the catalog itself remained fairly consistent. There was a little bit of an uptick, but not as much as we saw with Disney Plus. When the Disney Plus live stream happened, you saw that both the Diamonds album and his catalog ticked up. So people were starting to discover, they were starting to look for additional music from Elton and dive in more there. Going further with Disney Plus, our consumer research does show that rock is the #1 genre for Disney Plus, setting that up for a great platform for him to be able to connect with fans on. You know, and if you look at Gen Z, millennials, Gen X, boomers, all of them either say rock is #1 or #2. You know, and so when we're looking at, you know, sync or partnerships or, you know, places where you can feature, you know, your music on these new streaming platforms that we're seeing today, this is a way to connect with fans of your genre.
Audience is key.
Exactly. Audience is key. Knowing your audience is key. Knowing which platforms, because they do have different fans, you know. And another one that we wanted to shift our attention to as well is Euphoria. So this one is really, really interesting to me. Obviously, Labyrinth is hugely involved with Euphoria. But when you look at his total on-demand streaming, and this is his catalog, but the season premiere for Euphoria last year was on January 9th. And you can see that, you know, from our graph here, as soon as that hit, there was an exponential growth there. What I find very interesting is even in the last week of 2022, so just a couple of weeks ago, his catalog was still streaming 37% more than it did the week heading into the Euphoria season premiere. So it really starts to ask the question, does this rush of activity, does this discovery, does this start to set a new baseline for some of these tracks going forward? Well, looking at Labyrinth a little bit more, the weekly high for Labyrinth in on-demand streaming in 2021 was 9.7 million. That was the highest week of the year for him. Weekly high in 2022,
triple.
Yeah, triple. And looking at the average too, the average for him in 2021 was 6.3 million, more than double that in 2022 to 15 million. We want to shift our attention to another song that was in the same show.
The same episode, right?
The same episode. It was in the premiere. Very different artists. This is Jerry Rafferty, Baker Street, you know, those sorts of songs. This is but his song Right Down the Line was featured. That is from 1978. And when we're looking at this song, again, you can see that as soon as that premiere hit, exponential growth. And in this case, the last week of the year, just 2 weeks ago, still streaming 68% more than it did heading into the premiere. If you add up and look at his overall streams, his total on-demand stream, this is audio and video combined, but if you add those up for 2022 and look at 2021, 51.7 million total streams for this song, more in 2022 than 2021. So, you know, the implications of that are huge. You know, and let's look at, you know, the couple numbers that I want to call out here is the highest week in 2021 was 600,000. The lowest week in 2022 was 1.1 million. So, you know,
it's massive.
It's massive, and it connected with fans. So when we're looking at why Euphoria was reaching the right audience for both of these with our consumer data for HBO Max, again, we do see hip hop, rap, and rock being the genres that really jump out here. So it's about knowing the right audience and being able to maximize that. And then, you know, further on, you know, with additional marketing activities and things like that, really, you know, starting to drive these trends too. But again, the rush of activity really starts to ask that question, did the baseline for this song moving forward change? And that will definitely be something to keep an eye on for both Labyrinth and Jerry Rafferty of what, you know, their 2023 looks like for these projects and is how, if it's higher.
And what I think is super interesting about this example is I think a lot of the breakout things that we've talked about all year have been the older tracks, right? The things that have been revisited, the things that Gen Z think were just released. It always makes me like roll my eyes. And so what's really interesting about Labyrinth is that he's like actively putting out new music. This isn't something that was like an old song. Like he's collaborating on the show.
Exactly.
And so I think that there's a lot of power there for frontline artists as well.
Yeah, completely. And you can see it there that, you know, it's really brought him to a wider audience and really drove a lot of streams and activity. And, you know, using a platform like this and the right partnership and platform to really reach fans that are going to engage the most. It's incredible. Another topic from this year obviously catalog sales. I sort of feel like 2022 was the year that catalog sales went mainstream, and it's like all of a sudden this was a very, very hot topic, and there are a lot of things that were driving it. So what we wanted to do here is just spend a little bit of time just helping people maybe to understand why music is such a great investment, look at a couple of artists, and then just kind of point out what people might be looking at for that, for those. So why is music such a great investment? Number one, it generates value on day one. As soon as you're the rights holder, if your music is on these DSPs, and especially when we're talking about, established artists who are streaming every day, as soon as you're the rights holder, that revenue is going to start coming to you at some point. You're going to be taking ownership of that. The second step in that is because it starts generating value immediately, this can actually be used to leverage into additional purchases for further investment, because a bank is going to look at this and say, wow, this is generating cash flow right now. And so they will, a lot of times they look favorably on that, and you can start to leverage that for additional acquisitions. And then, a third point too is that what we are seeing, especially with global expansion and global barriers that are becoming less and less, emerging markets offer an amazing opportunity as well.
Yeah, we'll get to some of that global growth in a little bit, but also I think too, as these markets are growing and as the pools of money start diversifying more outside of the US and Europe, some of those payout rates in different countries are going to start to rise as well. So it's going to be an appreciating asset for sure.
Definitely. And we would just like to take a couple looks. So we're going to look at Bob Dylan. We're going to look at Bruce Springsteen. These are a couple of the bigger catalog sales that were sold in 2021, second half of that year. These are just estimated numbers of what they were sold for. It's not actually public, but these are the estimates. But wanted to take a look and share with you why these might have really been so attractive. So if you look at Bruce Springsteen, the boss released an album in November, and you can see that when you're looking at his overall catalog, you can quickly see how this uptick shows. So if you're investing in catalog and you have the rights for future project releases, you can see how this could help bring in more revenue.
And I think this example is great because it also highlights the opportunity and how deal structures are changing. So like Blake Shelton, I think, is a really good example of this, where he sold the catalog, but he also retains profit sharing in all future payouts. So if you're signing a catalog for someone who's still alive and still putting out music, you want to incentivize them to keep putting out good music because of bumps like this, right? And so giving that profit sharing option is a great way to do that.
And that is an important point there too, Matt, that, I mean, we are talking about streaming, and that's what's on the graph here today, but there are other ways that these deals are constructed too. There are other points to consider, whether it's name and likeness, or it's future royalties, or it's the publishing, or other marketing events like an album release, those sorts of things that people are looking at. We also put Bob Dylan on here as well, because if you look at that is about as predictable and straight as can be. The period change from the first week of the year to the last week of the year, 0.6%. So if you're looking at these and you're trying to predict what your income could possibly be in the future, to see something like this is just so steady.
There's no decay curve.
No, there is. Yeah,
it's a straight line.
It's just a straight line, which is great. So those are those sorts of things that people are looking at. Like, could this be predictable income for the future as well? And so these stats help shine a light there, and really help people establish what the value could be in the future. But as we said, there are those other aspects that could be deal point considerations, of course.
Performance.
Exactly.
The radio royalties, the bonuses they get.
Yeah, exactly.
For all of the when you hear the song on at Target or when you go shopping, the songwriters get paid out on every single play.
Well, and that's actually a great point for Bob Dylan, All on the Watchtower, Jimi Hendrix version. Bob Dylan, songwriter.
Right.
So that's another thing to look out for there too. Would be remiss if we didn't mention that Obviously, interest rates create, are a huge part of this, and we are coming out of a period where there were historical lows. So interest rates have been rising. It will be interesting to see, what in the future what those offers could be when money is more expensive to procure.
Yeah. Awesome. So now we've come to the global portion. One of the questions we get asked a lot is what makes a global hit? I feel like there are a dozen different answers and they're all right. That's kind of the problem because everyone's definition of success looks different. I think even everyone's definition of everyone supporting one artist, their definitions look very different, right? Management gets paid out differently, then the label gets paid out, then their tour manager gets paid out, right? There's a lot of different ways that you can be successful. So we wanted to start very simple. And so our V1 of what global success and being a global hit looks like, we wanted to account for a couple of things. How much streaming happens, right? Mm-hmm. Like how much are people listening to your music? We also wanted to take into account the rank, right? So there's a cachet and there's a certain cultural consciousness that comes with being #1 in a country, right? So it's not just that you're streaming a lot, but you are at the top of the chart. And then lastly, we also wanted to take into account the relative size of each country, right? Going #1 in Croatia, as much as we love the Croats, it's not the same as going #1 in the US or the UK, right? So we wanted to account for that. And we've got Tyler in the room who invented this score and did a lot of really great data science work to get this up and running. So if we go to the next page, you can see the 5 songs that have the highest global hit score around the world. So we've got Industry Baby, Hymn for the Weekend, As It Was, Heat Waves, and Enemy. Now, while Beyonce, one of my favorites, was on Hymn for the Weekend, this is a very bro-heavy slate here. So I'm really cheering that the world gets behind women in 2023 on this. But I do find it interesting, they're all in English. Mm-hmm. 2 of these are very clearly cataloged. Hymn for the Weekend came out 7 years ago, and Heat Waves came out 3 years ago. So again, talking about the value of catalog, certainly if they're cracking through across the globe, not just in the US. One thing I do want to call out, a perfect score of 100 means that you are #1 in every single country we measure. So Industry Baby got the closest, got about 2/3 of the way there. And if we go to the next slide, I can show you where it did best. So not super surprising. I feel like a weatherman a little bit looking here. Went #1 in the US, New Zealand, and South Africa. So these numbers, we're looking at their rank in terms of audio and video streams in 2022. So this is full year. So it was the heaviest streamed song in the US this year. It's not super surprising, right? It's a song in English. It's the #1 in English-speaking countries. What is super interesting, though, is if you look at all of the other colored-in countries here, it's all over the place, right? It's Asia, it's Europe, even in Brazil. It was if I'm getting my color codes right, it was the 3rd most streamed song in Brazil. So it has a lot of support in a lot of different countries.
What also kind of jumps out to me too is, just how video can push your song as well 100%. Into new countries, new areas. And I think that's probably a pretty big driver of maybe something like Coldplay's song.
Yeah, well, and especially if you watch the Coldplay music video, it is very clearly shot in Asia, and that song does very, very well in Asia, yeah. And pulls in other cultural references from the region as well. So I think it's, and I believe is it Holi is the holiday where they've got all of the color. It's featured in the music video as well. So I think artists are getting a lot smarter about being inclusive mm-hmm. in their content.
Great point.
I think also a great idea. It's never a bad idea to invite Beyonce to your music video.
Yeah.
I mean, I invite her to mine all the time. She doesn't respond. So one of the things we also wanted to look at is where's the growth happening in general. So Jamie shared like right up the top, 25, 26-ish% growth in global music streaming. So if we look at the fastest growing markets here on a percent basis, so this doesn't account for like how much streaming is happening in that market, Indonesia, Croatia, India, Colombia, and part of my cultural heritage, I'm half Romanian, very proud. All super high percentages, right? And what's super interesting as well is you've got representation from almost every continent here. That this growth is really happening everywhere. What's super interesting as well is if we look at the total percent of global growth. So if we were looking at like if streaming grew 21 billion streams, what were the countries that fueled that growth? And you can see India, which is the third fastest growing, is also contributing the most. Almost a quarter of all additional streams from this year came from India. Not super surprising, US is there as well. We're just a massive streaming market. So even growing at 12%, we're contributing a lot overall to the total global growth. Then you have Brazil, Mexico, and Indonesia rounding out the top 5. Kind of like to refer to these a little bit as like the brick of music. We don't track Russia, and honestly, I don't know what there is to track at the moment with everyone that's pulled out. But in terms of big population centers around the globe that are having large growth in music consumption, it's the players that I would expect, right? You've got Brazil, Mexico, Indonesia. The Philippines is right behind Indonesia. We just don't have it up on this graph. So we are keeping a very close eye on those countries. And actually in all of these, we do our consumer research to understand who the person is that's driving all of that streaming growth. And so pulling from that research, showing how music fans around the globe are consuming music differently, the other half of my cultural heritage, the Middle Eastern folks, I was shocked at this. More than any other region of the globe, likely to be using short form video to listen to music. Amazingly powerful in countries like Egypt, Saudi Arabia, the UAE. When we look at Europe, this is where radio is the strongest globally. Still has the highest penetration of radio of any region. Looking at APAC, really high video streaming rates at 77%. And Latin America, they're actually the highest penetration of both video and audio. So lots of music streaming happening in Latin America. Awesome. So we've made it. You survived a webinar. And before we get to Q&A, we'd like to say thank you. And we have a special offer. If you look under your chairs,
there's a car.
You get a discount code. So if we go to the next slide, one of the things we're really proud about, our team worked really, really hard in November and December to get this up and running. We, for the first time, have all of our audience intelligence reports available for purchase from our website. So we cover a bunch of different topics. A lot of the topics we actually discussed today. We have country-specific reports like Indonesia and the Philippines. We have genre-specific reports like K-pop in the US, Afrobeats in the US. We have other audience-focused reports. The one that's coming out later this month is Gen Z. And we also have topic-specific like Web3 and gaming. So as a thank you for sticking with us through the webinar, we have a 20% off code good through the end of February on any of these reports, year-end 2022. So feel free to check that out.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us. And now we would love to open it up to questions, if there's any questions in the room. And people can also put in Zoom as well to ask questions too. And we'll have somebody checking that.
Charlie.
Right here in front.
Yes, Charlie, I work with the technology. Luminate. Great presentation, guys. And just a preface here, I thought it was Hold Me Closer, Tony Danza, until I was about a junior in college. So consider the source when you're answering.
A big Friends viewer?
Yes.
Yeah.
And really the sync portion was the most intriguing to me. Super interesting. And I wonder if you guys have considered how much DSP's algorithm plays into the lasting effect of this. And have you explored that at all?
Yeah, so we'll repeat the question. I'm going to let Jamie answer first. But the question was, in looking at sync, have we considered or what do we think about DSP algorithms maintaining the longevity of those songs once they spike from a sync?
Well, we don't have, I'm just going to conjecture just a little bit because we don't have that exact data coming into us. But I will say, when you're thinking about, how algorithms traditionally work, right? When we're looking at social sites and those sorts of things, it's raising up the most popular content typically, right? So if you're getting a rush of streams or people are favoriting a song or they're adding it to their own playlist, my guess, this is just my guess, but it would seem that there is a signal being sent that this is now a newly popular song, or that there is a rush of activity and people are enjoying this song. So I would think that it could be possible that the algorithmic plays could then rise, or maybe it gets into more programmed streaming as well. Those sorts of things based on a signal that's sent that this is a popular song. Kind of along that as well. And, a very interesting place to explore, and I think that Matt and I have discussed this as well, is, we do live in an on-demand streaming world too. And, it would be interesting to say, okay, well, what are the viewership, how the viewership of Euphoria go throughout the rest of the year as well? Are we continually reaching new fans? Because just because the song, we saw that clear uptick right after the premiere. A lot of people tuned in, but there are probably other people who maybe started watching Euphoria in the summer. Because we are in that on-demand world, do these syncs have a longer lasting, sort of lifespan because people are coming to the show, later and later?
The asynchronous viewing.
Yeah.
We were just talking this morning. Someone has not watched the second season of White Lotus in this office. I will withhold judgment.
I haven't either.
But yeah, that people will come to these songs later on. I also think the other thing to consider is that these algorithms aren't static, right? Like they're going to take that feedback where, like, if people didn't want to listen to Running Up the Hill, like they would stop listening to it, they would start skipping it, they would thumbs down it, and it would find its way out of the algorithm. So I do think that it can help it reach a broader audience, but it's not going to sustain it for too long if people genuinely don't care about that song.
Yeah.
And not that it really matters either way, right? The continued growth is the continued
Right.
sustainability is the sustainability.
Yeah. Thanks for
Great question.
Yeah.
Okay, we have an online question.
Okay, I have a question from Philip. You mentioned that 2017 to 2020 is driving catalog. Do you share data about how catalog volume breaks down by vintage year? And if you excluded all music less than 5 years old from catalog, what would growth?
That is a great question. So I will repeat. The question was looking at catalog growth from 2017 to current. Do we break that down by vintage? So are certain decades contributing growth more so than others? We've actually done a ton of work in the space. We're actively doing some right now, looking at vintage, and do certain vintages have higher staying power? Do they have better decay curves? One of the very interesting things we see is there's a whole class of music that actually doesn't even have a decay curve. It has a growth curve, because as the adoption of streaming has increased in genres that have been traditionally slower to adopt streaming, things like classic rock, country, Latin, think of genres that have been traditionally radio heavy. There are a lot of songs in those genres that are just growing on a linear basis. So we do a lot of work. We could do a whole nother webinar just on that topic. So Philip, thank you. And please reach out to us. We can offline with you one-on-one about what we can do in that space. Anything to add? Sorry, I just totally.
No. I think you covered it. But it's an incredibly interesting topic, and I love your reference to the decay curves in some of these songs that are actually, showing a like a reverse, like there's an increase.
Having nothing to do with going viral on TikTok, by the way.
Yeah.
We have another question? No? Okay.
Yeah, let's do it.
An anonymous attendee online.
Okay.
In terms of fastest growing markets, are they paid for streaming?
That is a great question. So the question was, in fastest growing markets, are they paying for streaming? Yes and no. So it's very interesting. We just had a conversation yesterday on our team about all of the growth that's happening in India, which tends to be a highly free streaming market. I think what's really interesting to me is that you're seeing a lot of innovation and creativity, particularly in Southeast Asia, with the types of plans that are being offered. So
Yeah.
like there are like one-day streaming packages in countries like the Philippines and Indonesia, where people are happy to have commercials, they're happy to listen to ad-supported, but like maybe they're getting married and they would like a stream that doesn't have ads in it, or they're throwing a party and they would just like constant music. And sure, I'll pay a couple dollars for that in that moment.
Yeah.
But I'm fine with that, right? I think there's some really interesting things that are happening in that space, particularly in Southeast Asia, that could be interesting to explore in other markets. I just think culturally, there's a lot of differences in the way that people want to consume music. So it definitely varies by market. I can't like with a broad brush say, this is what it looks like, but we do have that. So if you want to know about music streaming rates, paid or free, or by specific DSP, we have that in 30 plus markets around the globe. Thank you, Anonymous.
This is from Andrea. Do you have any reports available about the live music industry?
That is a great question. We do not currently, and I was remiss, I should have mentioned this when we brought up the reports. We can do reports on pretty much any audience in any country. So that could be a genre audience, that could be a behavioral audience, like people who attend live music, people who attend a specific kind of live music, be it a festival, a concert, a small local black box concert, could be people who attend a specific music festival. Kind of our whole team, everything we do is focused on audience.
Yep.
And so as long as we interview enough people in our surveys, which got this in 2022, we interviewed over 45,000 people around the globe. Just a lot of people. So we can absolutely put together any reports like that. So please reach out and we'll find a way to get some of that information in your hands. Don't be shy, guys. Come on. Where are the hard-hitting questions?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
We'll do one more.
We'll take one more.
Does Luminate contemplate the role of editorial playlisting in driving streaming consumption?
So do we consider the role of editorial playlisting in driving consumption of specific titles?
Well, when we were looking at that does come in as on demand for us. We have a few different categories of streaming. Program, which is typically the user really has not a whole lot of choice in, and how what they're going to be hearing. It's basically almost like a radio. And there is the on-demand way. And so the editorial playlists do come in via the on-demand.
Yeah, and I do think like you can't avoid the fact that if something ends up on a big editorial playlist, that's going to have a big bump.
Yeah.
There's a reason why there are teams at labels that like their whole job is focused on getting songs on those. I see people on the DSPs nodding here. Yes, they do. They talk to us a lot. So there is certainly a value to that. We just don't at the moment break that out in terms of source of stream within our data set.
Yeah.
Awesome. So
The leading question is, can this recording be seen for this presentation?
and the answer is,
The answer is it'll be up on the site by the end of the day.
Okay.
No. So for those of you who didn't hear, if you would like to view this presentation again or
really
send it to
good.
your friends, it should be online via our website by the end of day tomorrow is where it will be. But thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you, Matt. This has been
thank
fantastic.
you, Jamie.
And thank you to everybody that's here, and as well as everybody that tuned in and your questions, and really, really appreciate the opportunity to speak to you guys today about the year in music that was 2022.
And if we didn't get to your question, we apologize. Please feel free to contact us via the form on our website. Have a great one.
Thank you.